Hello everybody, Jayborino here, welcome back. Have a special video here for you today. I'm here with fellow MapCraft admins Deltron Live and Protogo. Introduce yourselves.
Hey, Wolf.
I'm Deltron. Happy to be here.
And we are here with a special guest, ButaneBoss, the creator of Fucking Mental, Jim Raynor.
Hello.
Hello, thank you for joining us. So you, of course, are the winner of the StarCraft 1 portion of MapCraft, which was an excellent submission-based contest where people made maps, sent them in. I think we had six or seven. How many StarCraft 1 submissions did we have? Does anyone remember? I think it was 6.
More than 2.
More
Something
than 2.
like
Well,
that.
you were the winner of the number that we sent in, so congratulations.
Yeah.
We all loved FMJR.
Everyone did, really.
It's
Yeah.
true. You were the winner of the community poll as well, of all the maps, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm very grateful for everyone's support of the map. Just want to say thanks very much, folks.
Well,
You're
thank you.
welcome.
It was a blast to play, and thanks to everyone for participating, but especially the
Yeah, they were all
The
really
winners,
good
yeah.
submissions.
I thought we had a pretty good time playing through them. I still haven't done my retrospective, but maybe when I'm not frozen, I will. Either way, you could tell us a little bit about your map, I suppose. You know, what was your thought process when you were writing the script of? Actually, one thing I am personally interested in is where did you find all of the voice samples to make all of those characters say shit like "fuck" and "the time for our fucking stand has come"? Like, how did
Well,
you
I
kit
used-
bash all those audios?
I used WinMPQ to extract every one of the sound files, and then I put them. Sorry, did I
What?
speaking too close to the microphone, having an S?
Oh, don't worry about it.
All right, okay. I used WinMPQ to extract every sound file from the StarCraft and Brood War MPQ, and then I put them all onto, well, not all of them, but I put them onto, is it a program that I use for my YouTube videos called Movie Studio Platinum 12, which is basically a dumbed down Sony Vegas. I put them all in there, and then I just sort of mashed them up.
Wow.
Okay. So that's how you
long
make.
did
Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say sounds like you did more editing just for that like intro transmission than I've ever done in my life.
Yeah.
In a YouTube video.
Well, I do YouTube poops on YouTube, so I mean it's right up my territory.
Is an interesting way that you managed to marry the sort of like absurdist, comedic, like what is going on kind of approach, where you have these YouTube poops. I don't know if anybody else here is familiar with these, but they're fairly. They had their heyday back in like the earlier days of YouTube. I remember watching them when I was I don't know, it was like 2009, I think, or 2010, when I used to get real big into those. And it's just people taking videos of like cartoons or whatever and like mashing them into different, like making the characters say random stuff. Like a good one that I remember was when there was like some SpongeBob one where Squidward was like, "This is a big steak" instead of mistake. And then there was like a giant steak that they would Photoshop in that would like squish the characters. I don't know. It's just dumb stuff like that. But it's interesting how you managed to marry that, which is something, like you said, is in your territory. You've done this before. And you managed to combine that with making a map in StarCraft. But you don't originally come from StarCraft. So how did you get to the point where you were actually involved in making a StarCraft map? Because you originally come from like the Doom scene.
Well, I did mess around with Star Edit when I was around about 10 years old. I was very shite at StarCraft, but I really did love using the editor because it was just so easy to use. I think that's probably a double-edged sword, really. So easy a child can use it. But yeah, I did have a go at doing the mission briefings. Oh god, I remember this one map that I made. It's really shit in hindsight. Mission briefing consisted of Kerrigan and Dougal threatening each other, both voiced by Microsoft Sam, and then Raynor just comes in shouting, "Fish stick!"
This is a map we need for next MapCraft,
Right.
obviously.
And the map consisted of, like, your base is in the top left, and then there was an empty void of grass, and then just down on the bottom right, it was just Kerrigan and what's his face, Duran's base just in the bottom right.
So that it came from humble beginnings then when you were working within StarCraft.
Yeah, I did, experiment more with the editor, but then I just lost interest really.
So what
I
brought
never
you
really
back?
did publish any of them. It was just dicking around.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
what was
then-
what got you actually deciding to make this then and send it our way?
Well, I just done my biggest map for Doom, which was Optimum Arse Piss, and I felt really burned out. I have no idea where that name came from, but yeah, I found Jayborino's channel and I watched a couple of custom campaigns like Fire It Up, the Bob Levels, Rise of Devour's Children. Then I was inspired to get back into making that StarCraft map. So then I just thought of, why don't I make a survival map where it's just Jim Raynor.
Well, he's come a long way from saying fish sticks. He's turned into the man.
Can I just point out, I watched you linked a video of Optimum Ass Piss. Is that what it's called?
Yeah,
Your Doom
Optimum
mod. I
Arse
watched
Piss.
was that you playing it or was that someone else?
Yeah, that's that was a Let's Player who's now my friend.
Got it.
Piece of Pie Software.
Yes, I
think one of
watched
the
him play it
first-
and I saw flying accordions kill him.
Oh, yes.
So that was a trip. Well, I mean, we could talk about it a little later. One of the topics I wanted to really talk about is how like the Doom community has functioned and has been so solid. Because I think the original StarCraft still has that, and I think Warcraft 3 not as much, but definitely really solid. And StarCraft 2 just never found its footing. And I guess I'm curious, like in your time in the Doom modding community, have you seen like how has the community kind of evolved from your perspective? Because you've been so involved in it.
Well, I wouldn't say I was that involved, but I am really interested in Doom modding. I think the whole thing came about with the rise of GZ Doom or Z Doom, whatever you want to call it. It has so much in the way of modding and customizing that I think people were just so keen to make more things for it.
So it was the fact that you could do a lot with it that allowed a lot of creators to make it different ways. Because I know a lot of them have got like Brutal Doom is a really popular one where people just made like graphical enhancements in some cases. But you went for a more, I'm judging by the title, you went for a more comedic route, right?
Yeah. I was. Yeah, I basically just made maps and all that. I didn't really go on to do some big mods. I tried to with a Bioshock thing, but I just lost interest.
That sounds about right for community modding. You get a lot of people who start somewhere, they have a really big idea in mind, and then I would say at least 50% of the time it never materializes. But then you see those same people go on to create other really neat things. So it's just sort of like anything that gets people interested, I think.
Right.
And just
We were
thinking
talking
about it.
earlier about the release of source code, and Ed were like really keen on modding, and they released the source code like a few years after, and I think mainly that because that the source code was released, that way a lot of modders can go into the source code and then do their own thing with it. And I think that's mainly because of Doom's longevity that it's still going like even after 25 years. It's been 25 years now.
Been pretty close.
Yeah. It has to be now,
Yeah.
2018.
That's pretty wild.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's crazy to think.
I think less so with StarCraft because the source code wasn't released, but the editor was just.
It's a lot easier,
Yeah.
And barrier for entry was far lower, I think, than a lot of the other editors. Specifically, I think the reason why a lot of people find it easier to get stuff done in StarCraft 1 than some of the other RTSs that Blizzard have released is because in order to make events happen on the map with triggers, it's there's some weird nuances you have to learn, but ultimately I think it's pretty pretty easy.
Yeah, it's a lot more intuitive. Even I was making stuff when I was 10, 12, just making stupid
Yes.
stuff.
Yeah.
Same here. That was the
What were
first.
you making?
I
Oh,
really
yeah,
I
I've
liked
seen that.
those old Lord of the Rings type spawning maps where you had specific points on the map that you kind of like town halls basically, and you would protect those. And then as you built castles, it increased your spawn waves, and it was just large alliances versus other large alliances. So I tried making a couple of those. I actually made a couple that were like extreme versus AI versions. So you can kind of see how that has sort of led to the content of my channel, because I used to take PvP maps and turn them into PvE maps. But I was not very good at it, though. I never could fully make a briefing work properly. I don't know what it was. I could just never make the text scroll at the right rate. It would always just like zoom by. And it was something like with the weight trigger. I don't know. I just never figured it out. I never understood what switches were. But again, I was like 10.
Yeah.
So I think maybe I could figure it out now. I don't know.
Right. I mean, it shows that the barrier of entry is very low. Like anyone could open it up, put some units on the screen, things like that. But to actually do anything more complex takes a little bit more skill. So I
think
played
with-
around with the StarCraft 1 editor when I was younger, Age of Empires editor, but I never actually made anything.
It's really
more than-
interesting to me because to build off what you were just saying, Deltron, the idea that you can place units on the screen and make stuff look, you're basically making the same sort of maps that Blizzard made, because the maps that Blizzard made for their campaigns are not complex at all. But you compare the amount of work you have to do to make a map look like Blizzard's maps in StarCraft 1 to the same amount of work you'd have to do in Warcraft 3 or StarCraft 2. It quickly falls away. Like there's a huge gap between somebody putting a bunch of units on the screen and quickly whipping up some terrain in StarCraft 1, and then you compare that to StarCraft 2, and you need a lot more effort on the visuals to make the terrain look nice, and you need a lot more effort into data editing to change simple things about unit behavior. So the barrier of entry is definitely a lot higher, which I guess is why a lot of people go to old games like Doom and StarCraft 1 for their modding kicks.
Yeah.
It's to the point though where Doom and the original StarCraft are the two examples you're using. They've been so deeply delved into that you have extremely goofy, completely changed content, like total conversion mods for these games. So it's interesting how then you have StarCraft 2, which allows you to basically make that with the Galaxy editor by default, but people still aren't really breaking into it. So it's sort of like you need that easy barrier of entry to allow people to make something without a lot of struggle early.
In a lot of things.
Yeah. Then they'll return, and then they'll get deeper into it after they're able to make something initially, I suppose. But
easy to learn, hard to master. It kind of describes StarCraft's melee gameplay as well, because you think of like all the people who can start off and start playing the game and start spending their money and doing whatever else. But obviously the Koreans and the OSL and stuff, they're far ahead of anybody else who's starting out. And easy to learn, hard to master. I think StarCraft just was that in general. And of course, Doom was, one of those games that it was fun to play. And because it was fun to play, and it didn't matter if you died, because even though you would die a lot, you would still learn how to, fight the enemies and eventually win. And, you develop your own set of strategies. At least that's been my experience with Doom. And then you'd be encouraged to go back and play some custom stuff that maybe is a little harder. So I don't know if you can shed any light on that, ButaneBoss, about the idea
how far
behind
Doom's come.
Yeah, like I mean, Doom is a game just like StarCraft that a lot of people played when they were really young. So if you could in some way look at or shed some light on how it was when you started out versus how it is now, are there still a lot of custom content developers working in the scene that you know of?
Oh yeah, there are a lot of modders out there modding Doom. I use this program called Doom Builder, which is pretty simple to use. It has a lot of configurations. There's the map configuration for the original Doom, and then for ZDoom map configuration, which has ACS scripting, which is a scripting language used for Hexen, which was a Doom engine game. And yeah, I also use this editor called Slade, which pretty much you just put some pictures and music into Doom.
So it's like an asset importer, some sort of
Yeah.
front end for loading files. And then you said the other program that you use, Doom Builder, is that so that's basically like has a set of gameplay templates, almost like dependencies in StarCraft 2 or something, where you load
It's
a
a
certain
map
amount
editor.
of so you load like defaults for gameplay constants or whatever, and then it sort of dictates, do you want to use the original stuff from the original game and build off of that, or do you want to build off of like some of the other mods that have come out?
Yeah, it's kind of like that.
Okay. So
Yeah.
it sounds like there's been a number of community tools that have, similar to like SEM Draft in StarCraft 1, that have helped newcomers have an even easier time of diving into the more complex things. Would that be fair to say?
I suppose. Yeah.
Yeah, you need a couple people who are real champions. I think actually, Pronago, you were talking about this right before we started recording, but there are people who make tools that enable others, but they don't go on to make something that goes to, I'm going to say, an end user, a player themselves. So, again, I kind of call them champions of the community, where they're kind of the gatekeepers in the sense that had they not created something, maybe someone would have down the road, but they're kind of the gatekeeper of allowing other people to make more stuff. And even something as simple as someone making a visual asset in Warcraft 3 or StarCraft 2. That's the kind of stuff where, while they're not making something that goes straight to an end user, they're providing something to another creator who then makes something that someone actually plays, which I think is it's interesting. I wonder what the motivations of certain people are to do that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, what's really shocking, StarCraft 1 is a really crazy example where actually the balance of the melee tournaments that kept Brood War alive forever would not have been the same if SEM Draft was not created, because it actually allowed you to place like, custom backwards ramps without modding the game. So, and it had like symmetry features and stuff. So actually the way, like, all of those tournaments used all of those maps, and they were all created in the same editor. So to think like you trace it all back to this one guy who's still programming that editor now and updating it even as we speak is crazy to me. And he never saw like a dime from the Star League or anything like that. So that's like a crazy extreme example where his editor is probably responsible for more content than the base editor that the game shipped with. But even if you are going down to the smaller scale, like you're making a set of custom doodads or a custom model or something, or I guess in Doom's case, you probably make like custom splats for those, like, or textures or whatever for the levels.
Yeah.
You can still impact the development of content even if you're not actually developing the levels themselves.
Right. Yeah, I think of it's kind of in the same vein. Like, you have the content creators that are, creating maps just for their own enjoyment, or because it's their own hobby. They enjoy creating maps. Whereas similarly, asset creators, I mean, they're either doing it for their own maps or just because they enjoy it, and it's a hobby to them. So like in StarCraft 2, people have created like model importers and exporters, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I'm kind of concerned, though, like with the release of this source code that's recently come out for StarCraft. I wonder what that's going to mean in terms of remastered coming out as well. They might conflict with each other.
Wait, did they actually release the source code for the original StarCraft?
I don't think they released the source code. I think
somebody found it.
Yeah, Blizzard took it off that guy. I don't think they released it publicly, which is unfortunate. They didn't go the id route. But even if they had, you're right that Remastered's engine would look. It definitely has a different file structure. It uses like cask instead of MPQs, stuff like that. So it's still. I mean, we still already have like modding tools for remaster, but they're far more limited in what they can do, which is certainly like it's one of those things that is always going to be the casualty of large scale updates. You're not going to have the same freedom that you have, or that you had in the past when they release large updates like that. But if it's a trade off you have to make if you want to enjoy the benefits of 4K HD graphics.
I have 2 questions about fucking mental Jim Raynor.
Yes.
Number 1, why did he go to my Protoss base like 6 times in a row? That felt like bullshit.
Unfair.
It was just random.
I know.
Yeah.
But it's bullshit, all right? Let me explain exactly why. Number 2, real question is, I know you've made some updates since. If you want to describe what they are, do you think you've finally teased out every single method people can use to win?
Can you still use Dark Swarm?
Now I've taken out Dark Swarm, but I think people would just find out new ways to mess about. Well, not mess about, but just find new ways to exploit Jim.
Yeah, that's one thing I love about the map. It's basically like an open sandbox that the players are given a lot of options, and there's a lot of replayability. Like you can use spells like radiation, plague, disruption web.
I think Sandbox is pushing it, but yeah, there is there is a bunch of freedom though.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's really
use to defend.
I think it's really great that like I didn't even think about like Maelstrom or any of those abilities. I killed Jim with like ghosts and bunkers and spider mines, but like
that's what I usually do with Terran.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting how there's like probably a set of optimal strategies to win, but you don't have to follow them. You can play hard mode, as it were, if you wanted to play like an alternative strategy where you use like mostly spellcasters or something. One thing that I said about the map in the MapCraft video, like the winners video, or at least I think I said it, is that you wouldn't think that making a map that's designed literally around fighting a single enemy unit that has like crazy health and crazy stats would be like the best framework for a successful and enjoyable and replayable mission. But it certainly was in the case of fucking Mental Jim Raynor. So I don't know. There's like ways that maybe you could change that, but I think the core identity of fighting against this single unit that you're just trying to figure out how to stop is something that it's probably been tried before in a couple of different instances, but I certainly can't remember any of them. And I also think that this was undoubtedly the most memorable given the story context. Just some hero that we all know and love somehow
goes mental.
He
kills everyone.
He goes mental. He'll be seeing you.
I gotta say, I did enjoy though in the actual when I actually started playing, you kind of have a light bulb going. You're like, I know what I can do. I'm gonna disruption web him, and then you build your starport, and then it's like, oh, by the way, fuck you, it's 250 energy. And you're like, all right, fine, I'm gonna try Maelstrom, and then it's like, no mind control, Maelstrom, 250 energy, and then you're like, okay, I'm gonna try play. You just keep thinking, I could try this, and every time you build the requirement for that unit, you get that little pop-up that's like, you've been a victim of ButaneBoss's cunty balance strategy.
Right. Yeah, and also you change the stats for several units. Like I think Zerglings cost more than usual.
It's just to stop it
mass
from swarming.
Initially, I just made the map because I just thought it was funny, really.
Well,
I just thought, what if I just had an overpowered unit just to kill everyone? But as I kept editing it, I thought, you know what, maybe I can actually make this into a legit map. Maybe I could, with the right balancing, turn this absurd idea into something that's playable.
Well, that's an interesting sort of exercise in trying to figure out your not like, I guess, your inspiration in some sense. A lot of it comes from really unsuspecting areas. Like,
how do you mean?
You'll start off with this idea, like you were saying, I'm going to make a map with this really broken unit. And then you had some sort of first draft. And then you get to the point where you're playing it. And sort of like what Jay was saying, when you're like, I have an idea, I can do this. You sort of get that while you're developing it, in a sense. Like a lot of ideas, they say this like really cliche trope where it's like you miss all of the shots you don't take. And I guess that's really true in this instance, where if you never like decided to go ahead and pursue this zany, goofy idea, you probably, obviously, you never would have been able to win MapCraft with the map and get to the point where you're you've developed like an enjoyable map that is insanely replayable and has all of these different strategies and is actually quite deep in terms of the gameplay that's surrounding it, despite its humble beginnings, let's say. So I just wanted to like ask you about that. Like, have you had other ideas, or is this like a trend where you'll have like an idea that you think is really maybe on the surface level goofy, and then you'll go from there to try and turn it in, mold it into something that's more, I guess, not necessarily, well, just more complete or more fleshed out?
Sounds a bit like my YouTube channel, really, but
So everybody go and subscribe at youtube.com/c/ButaneBoss. No self-promotion here. This is the Jayborino channel, okay?
Oh.
But really, I'm intrigued. I'm going to go and check out what you've been making, because you were talking about YouTube poops. That's a blast from the past.
Gary's mod, stop motion animations.
Stop motion animation.
Yeah, on Gary's mod, you can just pose characters, and then I just made a lot of stop motions.
Huh.
And then as time went on, I sort of, got better at them, and then made a whole channel of them.
And now they're spreading across the galaxy.
So my take on all this stuff that you make across these different games, and I want to use this as an example. Hopefully this doesn't come across as like super hammy cheesy, but I feel that you're a good example of someone who just likes making stuff, as opposed to like it's not that you have one idea and you overplan it and then it doesn't get made. You just like, I'm going to do this, and then you make something, and then you make another thing, and you make another thing, and then sometimes it's lightning in a bottle, like flying accordions that kill people in Doom. Right? So I think that's the perfect example of the creativity that's necessary that lands some really good content. Not to say that someone can't have one really good idea and then like really, really plan it and schedule it and then deliver on it. But it's more that I feel like that's the kind of mindset that's necessary to get started on something. And again, I kind of view it as capturing lightning in a bottle. Typically when you capture lightning in a bottle, it was not originally planned to be such a thing. That's kind of the context of the phrase. Like, you're only doing it, but you didn't realize what it was, and then you released it, and then it's like fucking Mental Jim Raynor. It's like a cult community hit right away, and you didn't expect it to. So I think that's just the best mindset to have when you go into making something.
Yeah, sometimes you just have to start.
I suppose, yeah.
Just open up an editor, start putting some stuff in there, and see where it goes. Won't always work out, but if you don't start, I mean, you're never gonna going to finish anything.
If you don't start now, you'll never be mental.
I'm only basing that off of the fact that you've said a couple times that you didn't expect to win. So I don't know. Maybe when you started making, you're like, this is going to be the best map ever. Nobody knows it yet, but god damn it, this will be the best thing that's ever existed in StarCraft.
High accolades coming from Jayborino.
Yeah, I really didn't expect FMJR to be such a hit, as it were. I just thought maybe just throw in a bunch of YouTube poop humor in there, and yeah. But now I think about it more, that maybe I did. I'm surprised on how much work I put into that map. With the switches and all the balancing.
Yeah, you were talking with Vorgoz about that, right? You were trying to figure out switches and weights and stuff, and you look back and you learned a lot about the engine. Like, now, if you were to go and remake this map, it would take you far less time. Like, obviously, because you know all about the map, but from a constructing, like a structural standpoint, you sort of know how to get there, right?
Yeah, I was really surprised with myself, because this was like the first actual StarCraft map I've made since all those years ago when I was making fish sticks. Yeah, I mean, folk like iQuare and I mean, he's making really good maps, spent a lot of time in the engine, and then I just waltz in with fucking Mental Jim Raynor.
Well, that just goes to show. I mean, we've said it a couple times. I know, Deltron, you said this a couple times. Is if you're someone who's kind of on the cusp of wanting to make something, it doesn't have to be in StarCraft. It doesn't have to be related to my channel or something I'm going to do, but just kind of encouraging creativity. If you like something, try making something. Give it a shot. Just get started. You find a place to start and go for it.
Yeah, go mental.
Go mental, yeah.
Go mental. So, Butane, going back to Jayborino's question, besides like any small balance changes, did you make any other changes to the map after we played it? Like any major changes?
I think it was just really the small fixes, to be honest.
Okay.
Like the text alignment and stuff. I probably couldn't be able to do the civilian idea that Jay had.
What was
like
the
we
civilian idea?
put him on the beacon to skip the time.
Yeah, it would require some restructuring of I'm sure however you set up the timer triggers.
Yeah, a lot of juggling switches to do.
And I never figured out switches, so I wouldn't even know how. That's why I suggested it, because I didn't even understand it.
Yeah.
So, besides optimizing fucking mental Jim Raynor, did you have any other plans for StarCraft? Are you gonna switch back to Doom for your future stuff? Do you have any plans really at all, or are you just sort of gonna wing it?
Well, due to the popularity of fucking mental Jim Raynor, I was actually thinking of doing some more StarCraft. I have to complete this one Doom map though for that piece of pie software that I mentioned earlier. It's his 10th anniversary on YouTube, and I'm making a map for him.
Oh, that's cool.
And yeah, I was also thinking about, for StarCraft, maybe a piss take on a Rebel Yell map. Just have some fucked up Rebel Yell scenario. And speaking of big ideas, I was actually thinking of making a campaign. I think I just made the outline of the first level. But,
okay. Is it going to be related to... Oh, that's it. Let's hear it. What's the working title?
Cerebrate, Cerebrate, Cerebrate.
Okay.
Where it's pretty much yet another Terran mercenary group is wanting to control a Cerebrate.
I saw that Alan Schezer discussion earlier today. Is that related to that in the Discord?
I was... I think that did come from enslavers.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was actually thinking of, if enslavers were to have realistic consequences, then I would have... That's what I'm thinking of when making it. Sort of like a piss take of enslavers. How it would actually work out.
And not be a nightmare to play.
Yeah.
So that sounds like it'll be funny. Like I could imagine almost like a similar concept in I guess Insurrection's a good example, because that's something Jayborino's playing recently and Deltron's played recently. So like imagine like a piss take of that, where it's basically like they call up Jack and Bill's like, "We need your military genius, Jack," and he's like drooling on himself.
Jack Frost.
Yeah, I don't know, something like he's just not a military genius at all. Obviously, he's just like a 400 HP firebat that one hits vultures. So I don't know where
we did. Well, at least I listened to your Jack Frost voicing Butane.
Nice.
I think you're close. You can do it.
You can do it. Do a Jack Frost campaign where he you chronicle his.
Let's show him we mean business.
Nah,
fuck that one up.
Where he tries to serenade the Cerebrate.
To what, the Cerebrate?
Serenade.
Sing to it.
It's like, dude, I can't understand anything you say. You sound like someone with smoker's lung after 20 years.
There's like a band. There's like an old like 80s band that had the vocalist that sounded exactly like that.
I want to hear Jack Frost sing. That would be. That'd be amazing.
That's what I'm talking about, man. Come on.
That would be
What
so
if he
bizarre.
what if he has what if he has a brilliant singing voice and then he just talks like that normally? Like, you know what I mean? Like, what if he had a really, really good singing voice?
He's
sort
like
of
a Sinatra. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's like Ozzy, where you can tell what he's like when he sings. It's perfectly intelligible, but then when he speaks, you're like, what the fuck are you? What are you saying? That would be like that, but except he'd be the man. I don't know.
I would imagine a Jack Frost origin story would go something like, he's a fish out of water. He's the relatable character. He has no military experience, but then his home gets invaded, and the only way for him to fight back is to take heavy, heavy amounts of psychedelic drugs, which makes him a military genius, but then subsequently just fries his brain.
He thinks he's some military genius.
Insurrection was actually a bad trip. It all makes sense now.
But that's madness.
Jack, we need your military expertise. What? Oh, okay.
There's snakes in the walls.
I guess.
There's snakes in there.
I guess.
I guess. He's just... Oh, man. There's too many ways that could go. So, anyways, it sounds like a piss take of anything related to enslavers would also be pretty hilarious, because Alan Chesser would be like, I'm going to get this Cerebrit, and then the Cerebrit would just say no or something. I don't know. You could do...
I was thinking of another mercenary group, not Shazar's Scavengers. I was thinking of like some other mercenary group. I was thinking maybe first raid, like, would be to raid Ire and go, oh, I've found this, I know of this artifact which can control a Cerebrit, because shut up. And I'm going to go on down to the surface, and then Phoenix Clone goes, oi, don't do that, and then fuck you, get the artifact, and then go over to where the Cerebrit is, meets other mercenary groups who did exactly the same thing.
So it's like, just like two awkwardly...
you dick.
Get it?
So then, second mission would be that they fight each other over control over the Cerebrit, and then they get the Cerebrit, and then suddenly, bam, here comes the Dominion, because, you know, they've found out that they've got a Cerebrit now, and then the Overmind comes in, because, I mean, why didn't the Overmind come in like during Enslavers? Like, if all the Cerebrits are connected to the Overmind, then surely the Overmind would have known. So that, I thought maybe the Overmind can send his forces over there, kill them, and then they have to escape with their lives. And then suddenly that Phoenix clone from the beginning goes, nah, you didn't forget about me, did you? And then kills them. End.
Wow. Sounds like you got it all figured out.
anything that satirizes...
I think I spoiled it all.
I know. Now I'm never going to play it. Anything that satirizes kind of the pedantic lore snobbists, like, oh, well, I think the Overmind would have known in Enslavers. How could they have possibly released that? Rip Blizzard as a company, the fact that they forgot that. I don't know.
Enslavers would have been forgiven if it took place around about the Stand.
Yeah.
Overmind and Fall.
I mean, anything that works with any sort of, like, what did you call it, Jay? The straw man commenter? You got to work that into the actual dialogue at some point.
Straw man commenter, yeah.
But actually, Phoenix Clone, you're supposed to be dead, just like the real Phoenix. And then he just dies with a Phoenix Clone. This is fine.
Yeah, typically anything that starts with well, comma,
Phoenix
actually.
Clones are called. I am Taldarim. I'm the who's friends with Adun. No, you're a Phoenix clone. Shut up.
Just name him Phoenix Clone, or like Phoenix backwards.
Phoenix backwards. That's a good one.
Nefix.
What are you thinking about Narud or something? What's going on? You channeling Blizzard over here, Jay?
Yep. You know, okay, this is a random thing I just want to bring up, because we just brought that up. I'm shocked. You know, like years after.
Yep, yeah.
I mean, the game is Wings of Liberty was 8 years ago now, almost, and when I made my playthrough, it was like 5 or 6 years after, and people still didn't realize that it was just the same name backwards. Like I guess I didn't realize how not obvious it was when I saw the name when I played. I'm like, oh, it's him, right? And then people would leave comments like, "Did you know, Jayborino, that Narud is Duran backwards?" I was like, "Oh my god, my mind is blown! I've played through this game 7 times and I never realized." I don't know. It's so strange. Or someone would leave a comment like, "I never realized that."
And they're not being satirical.
Yeah, as far as I can tell, they're not. So
Well, part of it is, I think, related to the presentation of Narud in general, because he's just like this like we have no attachment to him from previous.
Just an old man, yeah.
Just some old dude. He's like, "You are quite annoying to me," and then you're like, "Well, okay." And then
It's like the scientist who's trying not to be evil. In Doom 3, there was this... Oh, gosh. The main villain was basically Dr. Betruger, and Betruger is basically German for betrayer.
And he had that scar on his eye, and he had that voice, like he was clearly evil.
They simply can't handle life here.
Yeah.
They're exhausted and overworked. Even these few accidents could have been avoided.
if you would also come to my secret evil master plan.
Basically.
I think it's goofy because he's never confirmed to be Duran until you just show up in the void. Okay, I can't even continue this conversation in the void.
Didn't Zeratul say in the prologue that he was Duran?
I don't think so. I don't think it was ever
No,
explicitly
he actually
said.
just says Narud, I'm pretty sure. I don't know.
It's not explicit until the very
not
end.
until the epilogue. Yeah.
Whatever. That's a rabbit hole.
That's a rabbit hole.
That's a rabbit
Like
hole.
a plot hole.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's both. Yeah.
Blizzard have a shed full of shovels
Yeah.
to dig
Wow.
plot holes.
There's not enough plot left after that one.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
so where do we go from here?
MapCraft 2018.
Pretty
Yeah.
much.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Butane, we hope to see something from you in 2018 or whatever you plan on working on for whatever game. I hope you continue to enjoy it.
I hope so too. Depends, how much work I have to do for uni.
Right, yeah. You
Yeah,
were
yeah.
working on MapCraft in between like finals, weren't you, or something like that?
Not finals, but yeah, it was.
Was up there.
Yeah.
Well, we'll try to schedule the next contest in a little bit further away from the holidays, so hopefully that doesn't wind up happening.
Yeah.
But we'll do some
Can't wait to
research
see
on the
other maps,
logistics.
though,
Yeah, I mean,
from other people.
like
Yeah.
I was saying before we started, I think this year is going to be a great year for content. So
I think so too. Speaking for all the other
Yeah.
SC1 submitters in our future contest, don't submit anything, please, because we would like to win. But no, seriously, everybody who is making something, just definitely throw it our way. Looking forward to it.
yeah,
Oh yeah.
some content.
Like to see more folk getting into mapping, whether it's Doom or StarCraft 1.
Yeah, and hey, who knows? Maybe some interest will be generated in the Doom community as a result of this little interview, and we can get some more crossover between that. That would be crazy, but pretty cool.
I've played
Yeah.
some Doom mods. They're fun.
Which ones?
I've played Brutal Doom, which I think that's like the entry level. Like everybody who's aware of it has played Brutal Doom, and a couple other ones that were total conversions. I'm trying to remember. I've also played a map that had
Simpsons
like
Doom?
1,000 revenants in it or something like that. Where you had to like run through
no,
a giant.
nuts.wad. Was that
What's that?
nuts?
I don't
Might be.
remember. This was very long. I just remember it was just one giant fire plane full of revenants that you had to run through and get to the end.
A really good total conversion that came up recently was realism, like REEL-ism,
Okay.
where it's pretty much a invasion mode, where pretty much it all depends on randomization of weapons, monsters, and the conditions. It's really fun.
So it's sort of
And
like
the
a
same
single-player
creator
horde
who
mode,
did
or-
that. Yeah, it can be online as well.
Oh, okay, cool.
But yeah, the same creator who did that also made what I think is the best Doom mod so far, Meta Doom, where it's basically a mashup of like every single Doom game into one.
Wow.
So is this a mod, or is this
Yeah, it's a mod for
map,
the
or is
original
it
Doom.
both? Oh, okay. So you play on the original maps, and then it's modded.
Yeah,
Okay.
No.
We'll have
really-
to check it out.
Realism. Okay.
yeah. Realism and meta Doom.
Oh, Metadoom.
Also,
Okay.
there's this
Metadoom.
one called Samsara, which I've loved for a long while. It's kind of like you play as the characters of various classic first-person shooters. Duke Nukem, the guy from Quake.
And what happens in there? Just
Yeah, it's a
Just shooting
gameplay
shit.
mod.
oh, okay, cool.
Yeah,
You
where you
just-
play
you
as
play as
the
the different-
different
yeah.
characters. A lot of balancing is done so that they can work like a co-op with the different characters.
Mm-hmm. That's pretty interesting. As there's so much. I mean, the Doom community specifically is so rich with this kind of stuff, and there's so many other like Command and Conquer, Age of Empires, just on the RTS side, that have huge modding communities that I've considered looking into, and I have not yet. So it's awesome to know that there's so much untapped content that to be played that so many people I feel like don't know about that would love it if they just knew about it.
Yeah. We were saying earlier about longevity, that I think maybe because that certain games are moddable, then like they can last for so long.
Mm.
I was really disappointed that BioShock wasn't moddable.
That would have
I
been a
mean-
very interesting one to see.
Yeah, it has so much lush assets, and they're just not used. I mean, the previous game, System Shock 2, that was moddable, and just recently that there was a mod for System Shock 2 called System Shock Infinite, which was pretty much kind of like a multiverse thing for System Shock 2.
Mm-hmm.
And it's good that a lot of folk, I think, not as much as Doom, but they still make some custom content for System Shock 2.
I imagine if that's also because System Shock 2 is older, and maybe this is me making. I am making this up, so call me out if I'm wrong. But I feel like older games are easier to crack into without the support of the creators. Or did the creators allow people to mod in System Shock, or was that strictly community driven? I wonder.
It was done in the Dark Engine. I'm not sure if the source code was actually done for. Although surely a modding editor would have been out.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting how a lot of those games, those older games, I guess, are, or not even older, but just games that we're all unfamiliar with, right? Like we're all just mostly in the Brood War scene. The three of us, I mean, the three judges here, and it's cool to like branch out into other modding stuff because for whatever reason, a lot of people flocked to the Blizzard RTSs for modding, but Skyrim is still, I think, pretty big for modding.
Oh yeah.
Most of the Bethesda games are pretty big for modding.
Yeah.
So.
Even like XCOM
Phew,
2 is
not
big.
anymore.
That kind of stuff.
Oh yeah,
Like
isn't there some
paid
dumb...
mods?
Oh yeah,
Exactly.
Bethesda doesn't know what the heck they're doing. It's just like totally tone deaf of their community to think that they could make a marketplace for that.
Yeah, they're trying to take modding and then sort of capitalize it.
I don't think any effort has ever, or I don't think that there is a great way to do like paid modding or modding through compensation. Like modding
There's
for
no
profit
good
is
way
not.
to do it.
Yeah, there's really no. I don't think there's a good way to do any sort of modding through.
Paying.
Yeah, just like the idea behind modding is really just that you're trying to create something from a personal place, like you're passionate about something, and you're working in that context. The idea that you're gonna make this and then sell it somewhere, it changes. It's like the reactions that a lot of people had to the Blizzard Marketplace when they were talking about launching for way before Wings of Liberty came out, like a year or two, a couple BlizzCons
That was
before
a thing.
StarCraft 2. Yeah, they were
People
talking.
still talk about it as if it might happen, and it's like it's definitely not going to happen.
No, it's definitely not happening. But the idea behind the map marketplace was that you could make a map or a mod or something like that. You could put it on the marketplace, and if it was approved or just maybe in general, you could price it out, and then people could like maybe try it for for free for like 15 minutes, or I don't know what their plans were for that. I don't really know the specifics, but Blizzard would take some of the money and the developer would take some of the money. So very similar to what Steam eventually tried with those paid mods. And I feel like it enters in a very different process of how these things are created than if you're just modding because you find it rewarding on a personal level. I feel like you're definitely sacrificing something when you decide that this is going to be for money. And not to disparage capitalism or anything like that either, but the idea that I'm going to spend hours and hours and hours for passion, you care about different things when you're working in that context than when you're working on something that you expect is going to make you money or that you're treating like a job. Like, if you can remind yourself that the reward is a paycheck, whereas if the reward is just what you make of it, what you're, seeing it completed, seeing it through, I think it's more fulfilling for a lot of people when that happens, and I don't like conflating the two. But
I think that's an interesting topic. It's kind of it's a whole new can of worms, but I'm okay to continue talking about. I'm interested though in if somebody who wants to make a map because they like the game, isn't the money, the addition of a cash incentive, isn't that just kind of an added benefit? I mean, if anything, the fact that you could make these things for money would just end up flooding the community with more stuff, and that means you'll get more bad stuff but also more good stuff, and then that's on top of the people who were going to make something
Did
anyway.
you just slip in a good stuff?
Yes, I did. That was inadvertent. It's inadvertent.
Well, no, that is going to be something that we clip for later use. You said bad stuff and good stuff back to
Good
back.
stuff.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, I agree with you, Bronago, in that I think it comes from a different place. But I wonder though if the same people who would have done it not for money would still do it anyway, if there was some cash.
And also, how could you put a price tag on a mod?
That too, yeah.
I mean, how, the quality of it and the amount of time spent on it.
Yeah, it would have to be completely community sourced, kind of like Steam Greenlight almost, where people play it and then they rate it and can decide if it's good enough to be considered worthwhile to buy. I wonder. I don't know. It would have been a whole
Right.
different shop paradigm that I don't think they ever worked out, and there weren't enough people participating to do it anyway, and I don't think there ever will be on the StarCraft 2 arcade. That's
but if
definitely.
they went through a series like what you were just referencing with Greenlight, and I don't actually know how Greenlight works, but if that's actually the case where people don't pay for money, they don't pay money for these products, they just play them before they're ready to be released, ready to be authorized on Steam, and then they rate them and decide, okay, this is something I would feel comfortable giving money to, regardless of if I will buy this. I feel comfortable, I feel like this is a good quality product. I mean, isn't that basically the same thing as just donating to a developer who's made it something that you like?
Oh, definitely. But if it's worked into the marketplace itself, you're more likely to actually get people to give you money. Whereas if you just say like, "Here's my Patreon," you get one patron for $2 and it never goes up, just because it's just that visibility. You get so much more visibility if it's tacitly approved by the developer of the actual game by integrating it into the arcade or marketplace or what have you. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's an interesting concept. I don't know if we'll ever see it for community mods though.
There is an alternative though, if they actually go into the game industry and make money from there.
True.
I don't know if there's enough open positions at this point. The problem is that this leads into like a completely different topic about like global economies and whether or not we're entering into a recession, and how can we have how can gaming companies, I mean, everywhere I look in gaming news, the industry is downsizing. Companies are letting go of employees. Mm-hmm. So it's hard to think that. Yeah, so I know a few people who have worked on mods for a while, and they're trying to develop their own games eventually. And I think the way that you do that is basically by way of doing it without publications, or rather a publisher. So sort of what people refer to as indie, except that's even sort of transcended that. A lot of these people would be like, working in the Unreal 4 engine, which doesn't require you to pay while you're developing the game, and then like
You
once
need a
it's
license
done,
for Unreal 4 though.
you do need a license to sell. So the way
Oh,
it would
yeah.
work is you complete the game, and then you're like, hey, I actually have a game done. I can now invest money for the license so that I can then sell this product. And then, then I'll recoup the license fee by people buying it on Steam and other places. But the issue that, the problem that comes from having any sort of like incentive that's based around trying to join a company, like so many of the developers that work in StarCraft 2, like I know Outsider XE, I know Cyberus X, these developers try to make these projects so that they can then get hired by Blizzard. And I don't think that that's like a proven way that Blizzard does business anymore. Like back in the day, a lot of the modders and hackers from Brood War got hired. Like, shockingly enough, one of the main developers of I can't remember which tool it was, but one of the tools for Brood War now works in Blizzard's like QA department for their technology side. So he's worked in the company now, but that doesn't happen anymore. It's just not something. It's not a way to make your career known. It's sort of gone more corporate side, where you need a degree and you need all these accolades and references and stuff, and it's a lot harder to get into than it was when it was more of a grassroots thing. Gaming and modding by extension was a lot more grassroots back in the day, and now modding still sort of is, but I don't think that the games industry still is. So I think that's why you have so many clashes, is because these big corporate guys, I don't want to make sweeping generalizations, but a lot of these guys are like, well, let's try and monetize these mods, but they don't really they either don't remember if they were ever a part of it, or they don't know because they never have been a part of what the modding community is. Yep. So you've got this grassroots organization about it, and then you have the casual audience who thinks maybe I can make some money off of this by it being a quick cash grab. And so they go into it for the wrong reasons. They don't go into it because they're passionate about making it. They go into it because they want to make money, which is where they're going to lose interest and then fall off very immediately once the money dries up, or if they don't succeed immediately, which is, whatever. That's not necessarily a big negative. It's just something that's bound to happen. And then obviously there's like that clash between the grassroots stuff of the diehard dedicated modder base and the corporate guys who are trying to monetize it. And I feel like there's got to be some sort of conflict between those two groups, unless there's bound to be, unless the company actually knows sort of what they're doing, or what the modders are doing in that sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, a lot of mods come from passion for the game. Right. Like, for instance, we were talking about Greenlight and Steam earlier. There was, let's say, on one side there's Black Mesa, which is a mod which is now an actual pay-for game, but it started off as a really passionate thing, and it still is a passionate thing. They just did it because they liked Half-Life. But on the other hand, when you're talking about the casual folk who think that they can, go in to get a quick buck, that's where like shitty Unity asset flips come in.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the thing with those, people aren't going to be paying for them, so they're not going to be making any money. Then you're going to have like a few people that are really passionate about what they make, and they make really amazing things, and those are the people that are going to be making the money.
Yeah, so I think the only people who are gonna buy those crap asset flips are, folk who just want to buy it so that they can make fun of it.
Well, that, or there's just people who are uninformed. Like one of the issues that was happening in the Skyrim section when they were doing those paid mods was that they would have all these asset packs for like weapons or whatever, and then somebody would take an asset pack that somebody had made, pay for it, or otherwise acquire it, and then release each weapon as its own thing. Like literally, I guess you can now say stealing their work, because it's like a product.
Yeah.
And they just release it one by one for more money. Like 99 cents per weapon, and where the whole pack was like $2. I don't know what the exact figures were, but there's something similar to that. So that's the thing is, as far be it for me to say that I'm not a cynical person, because typically I have been, but I do think that there's something to be said for the human nature in a greed sense. And I think people are always going to do stuff that's really weird and morally or ethically like untenable, like stealing other people's work to make money. Because it happens when there's money involved, and it doesn't really matter if it's related to modding or gaming, or if it's like, I'm stealing your food supplies to sell the food at a lower rate to, stealing your customer, whatever you want to say. Like the corporatism of that sense happens, and I think that would just continue to happen, regardless of like sort of what economic setting you were placed in. As long as money is involved, there's going to be people who use it well and people who don't use it well. It's the same
Greed
for probably
ruins
any
everything.
Greed rules everything.
Oh, I said ruin, but yeah.
Oh, well, yeah, rules, runes, both.
Yeah.
I think the idea of getting a job because you make something in a game is very intriguing to me. I would have never expected. I mean, nothing we do in gaming as a hobby really translates well into a resume. It should in some cases, but it doesn't really. Like even like, hey, I made a YouTube channel and I've garnered a community. There's a skill set involved in that. You could put it on a resume, but would I put it on a resume? Probably not, because no one would take it seriously. Maybe they should, but that's the thing. Even like, I've made StarCraft maps. They're incredibly complex. If only you understood what the StarCraft 2 Galaxy editor was and understood the amount of work and time that I put in to make this, it would be a marketable thing. So that way, I think people are thinking, well, I guess I can only work at Blizzard because they're the only ones that understand the amount of work I put in to do something like this. But that still doesn't really translate directly on a resume on how well you are working in a team and working towards deadlines and negotiating your salary. That's the kind of stuff that just because you make a game or make a map and you're passionate does not really translate to being a good employee, which I think is the problem, especially now. Whereas back in the day, I think they were more willing to take risks because making games was a little cheaper, didn't take as long. And so now they're so risk averse. They're like, no, we're not going to take a risk and hire someone who made a map that just because it was good doesn't mean that they're going to translate into an employee that's going to actually help our product. I think that's the ultimate problem.
Now it's more about contacts and who you know, and if you can get someone to actually read your resume.
Yeah.
House of Cards.
Pretty much.
One of the bigger issues, I think, with the approach that some people think where they have to work at Blizzard because they're the only people who can understand or whatever. Listen, Blizzard does not use the same tools that we use if we're making StarCraft 2 maps.
Yep.
No, they don't. They have their own set of art tools that they will not release to the public for whatever reason. I have a little bit of inside knowledge behind this based on my contacts, funnily enough. And a lot of the people who are like were working in StarCraft 2 once upon a time have long since abandoned any idea of working on custom content for that game, specifically because there was such it wasn't just that they wouldn't release the tools that they had, which could be seen as they're not actively facilitating or supporting the creation of content, but it's because they were actually stopping people or banning people from doing their BattleNet accounts or whatever for stuff like that. So I don't think it's necessarily malice, but I do think that they're very wary, especially in the context of Dota becoming its own game,
right,
and now challenging them because of IceFrog basically ruled Warcraft 3 and Warcraft 3 wasn't going to be a super tenable esport anyways, but it at least would have had a longer life cycle than it did if Dota had not come along and significantly overshadowed it and then turned it into its own game that now competes with the likes of StarCraft 2 and League of Legends and all these other esports. So the idea that Blizzard would want to gobble up all of that talent is a nice one, but they're much more likely to just stop you from even making something that would truly set you apart from the rest of the field because they're worried that you could just turn that into your own business prospect somewhere down the line, like what happened with IceFrog and Dota. So it's a very complicated scene to try dissect and understand what's going on with it. And unfortunately, nobody's really going to know all the important bits because they don't. Not only do Blizzard, they don't use the same tools, but they work in these teams where some people are working on like level design and some people working on asset design, and it's a development team. It's for a game, and the idea that you have to learn a lot of different things, and you can specialize if you're like a one-man team, but odds are you're going to be something of a jack of all trades, master of none when you're working on a project like this, and they already have people who are more qualified than you in their own specializations than you are in any specialization of your own, because you've had to do everything, whereas they have a team of people who specialize in certain
individual things.
aspects
Yeah.
of it. Yeah. So I think that I don't want to like shoot anybody's hopes down or whatever, but I think that if you're making mods because you want a career, you can maybe use it as valuable experience. But I would also argue that going for a more technical side of things is going to be more useful to you. Figure out C++, figure out ASM or whatever, and try and learn some of that if that's where your aspirations lie. But I don't think much of our aspirations lie there. I think that we've boiled down to just the people who are interested in designing content because they like the content, like ButaneBoss with fucking Mental Jim Raynor, or any of the other content creators we have here. We make content because we want that content to exist, not because we want to get compensated for it through finances.
Yeah. It's
What
a
are you
shame
talking about?
that-
I'm gonna make a solid 5 cents on this video. I don't know what you're saying. It's all about that money, all right?
Gotta get those $15 MapCraft prizes as well.
I'm just kidding. This will probably get flagged as not suitable for all advertisers. Oh, YouTube jokes.
Ad pop.
Yeah, it's a shame that game companies now think that, modding is only good if it benefits them.
Yeah.
Especially with the paid mods and the whole thing with Ice Frog.
There's just a lot of layers to it. I think
Oh.
it's just that corporatism stuff.
Yeah, I hate to bring
So
it back
long
to
if it
Blizzard,
doesn't
but
conflict with their ideas.
yeah, they really hosed themselves with Ice Frog, and because he came to them.
Oh yeah,
and
he
sa-
wanted to make Dota.
He wanted to make it with them, and they said no. And now, they're kicking themselves over that decision. And then I think the pendulum swung way back with StarCraft 2, and they're like, we definitely can't risk this. So they made the terms of service a lot more strict, and the arcade was sort of neutered from the start, and it stopped any organic growth like used map settings had with both Warcraft 3 and StarCraft 1. And I think that's just sort of been like a cautionary tale ever since. And now it's always just like, well, how can we monetize this? You have some developers, like Firaxis is a perfect example with XCOM. When Long War came out for the original XCOM Enemy Unknown, they're like, this is incredible. And they're like, when we make XCOM 2, we're going to open it up to mods immediately. We want mods. It's so cool. It inspired us to make specific gameplay choices for XCOM 2. And that's the kind of risk. It's like a risk. It shouldn't really be considered a risk. It's just a great decision on their part, but I'm happy that they're willing to take a risk like that to just say, you know what? Yes, please make stuff. We feel like we don't have anything to lose, and we will use some of your ideas if we think they're good, and they have. I think that's admirable that there's some companies that are willing to do that.
There's some cautionary tales to be had on the other side of the pendulum, unfortunately, which is the idea that you're going to have a sort of laissez-faire approach, hands-off approach to your intellectual property.
Yeah.
It's not really sort of the same thing, but
Right.
I think you can definitely reference Warhammer 40k in this instance, where you just have a lot of random, like, sort of confusing games or titles in general. And it's like, well, Relic and Games Workshop were just like, yeah, you can just do whatever. If you want to make a Warhammer game, go ahead. And in some cases, that will lead to good stuff. It's sort of like when Jayborino was mentioning that we have, if we have a large influx of people because there's money involved, maybe there will be there's going to be a lot more stuff, period. But some of it is going to float to the top because of its quality. And yeah, that's going to be true for Warhammer 40,000. Inevitably, some developers will make some really good games, but a lot of developers will not make really good games. And
they will be awful, yeah.
yeah, absolutely. So you gotta pick your poison. Like, I think generally speaking, I'll put it to you this way: if somebody came to me and said, can I make some sort of edit to Inconsummate? I'd be like, yeah, but I expect to have credit for whatever you make, because you didn't make the original stuff. And I think that's basically the most I'm willing to try and control somebody else, is like, I don't care what you do to my work. I want people to learn from it. But I understand why a lot of people would want to protect their work, because it's theirs. And for whatever, for ill or for good, the idea of something being yours after you've invested countless man hours into it is something that I can totally understand. So there's going to be, I think that there's just a lot of interesting reasons. We've dug in pretty heavily into this interview about motivations for why people make stuff, and I just hope that most people come around to the idea of making stuff because they genuinely want that stuff to exist, and they want to. And nobody else was going to make the campaign that they wanted to play, so they made it themselves. Like that's where I found my genesis, and I hope that a lot of other people found it for similarly passionate personal reasons, as opposed to the idea that it's a means to an end in that sense. So,
well, I think now is a good time for me to announce that I'm working on my own project called Goddamn Crazy Jim Raynor. It's going to be available on if you're a patron of mine on patreon.com/JayborinoPlays, and you're at the 100 tier or higher, then you can gain access to Goddamn Crazy Jim Raynor. So hope to see you there.
You know, that does actually ring a bell.
I swear it's been taken nowhere. I mean, there were no rights to anything that I may have used from, so no copyright infringement.
Completely
fair enough.
Original idea.
yeah, absolutely. It's not like it just won a contest or anything.
So we've been talking for a bit over an hour here, so I think we want to go ahead and wrap it up. But this has been a great conversation, and we really appreciate you coming on and chatting with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jay, folks.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks.
Thanks
It's
for
been a
coming
pleasure
on.
talking to you.
Been a pleasure playing fucking Mental Jim Raynor.
Cool. We hope to see you for
hopefully we'll
MapCraft
see you in,
2018.
Could you maybe rephrase that in a meme-worthy way?
You made good stuff.
I'll be seeing you.
That's the one.
We'll be seeing you.
We'll be seeing you.
I'll be seeing all of you later.
Great. Thanks, everyone.
Okay. Thanks very much. Bye.